Ghosting online. We're going to talk about that today. But no, I'm not referring to when someone completely disappears and stops communicating in all forms online. I'm referring to Ghosting Online, a book written by Darius Guerrero. Now, if you recognize that name, I'm not surprised because I talk about them a lot on this channel. Darius Guerrero is the lead developer when it comes to the AppsSir games. And a while ago, they had written a book, and that's what we're talking about today. I don't usually do videos like this, but I felt since it falls under the AppsSir series, which I absolutely love exploring on this channel in different ways, like not just playing games, but watching videos on the YouTube channel, and now we're going to do a bit of a book review. This video is going to be split into two different segments where I talk about the book as a book in and of itself, and as a book in the AppsSir series. My cat is going crazy in the next room, you might hear him. But Ghosting Online, oddly enough, has like 3 different titles that it goes by. And I'm not sure what the reason for that is. But you can find it as Ghosting Online, a modern dating horror story, and when I was reading it on my phone, the title was Ghosting Online, The Deadly Thrills of Online Dating. Now, I'm not sure why there's some inconsistency with the title there. I'm assuming there was perhaps some updates, perhaps to the Kindle version, which changed the title. But either way, when I refer to the book, I'm simply going to call it Ghosting Online. So our first segment, we're going to talk about the story as a book, not as someone who is a fan of the AppsSir series, but someone who just picks up the book to read. First, we'll talk about the biggest weakness, the most glaring weakness, is there are quite a few grammatical errors in this story. Now, there is reasoning for that, and that's that Darius Guerrero's first language is not English. So I'm willing to give, a little bit of a slip by for the grammatical errors, but when publishing a book, someone usually goes through and reads and makes edits when it comes to that, but it seems like that may have been missed a little in this book, and that is a bit off-putting because there are multiple times when reading through it where I have to stop and was like, wait, that doesn't make sense, and read back the sentence again, realizing there was a grammatical error. I'm pretty sure there's a mistake of the to and to, or the multiple theirs, which is pretty basic stuff, I must admit, that you would expect someone when writing a story to get right. So like I said, that's the biggest glaring issue here. But since the writer's first language wasn't English, a little bit of a slide by. We're going to get into some more critical stuff, and we're going to talk about each of the main characters. So we're going to talk about our characters first. I don't believe any of them were given a last name. So our main character is simply called Adam. And he's a chauvinistic asshole who views women pretty much just for their bodies. Right from the start of the book, we're introduced to him dating a girl, but he doesn't even remember her name. He hooked up with her on a dating app, and he's gone on a date to get her home into his bed and toss her by in the next morning. And that is everything you need to know about our main character. That is his whole personality at the start of the book. The story is supposed to resolve by the end where, Adam sees the mistakes in his ways. He realizes, oh, there's no need to rush in life, and I believe those are some of the words straight from the book, is there's no need to rush. I can simply enjoy the moments as they are. But to get there, we have to see the character develop. Our next character is Roman, who is Adam's roommate. There isn't very much to this character other than the fact he enjoys playing video games. Now, we'll get into why exactly the most common view you'll get of Roman is of him playing a video game, but to explore a little more of his character, we get to see a bit more of his actual caring side towards A, his roommate, and B, that he sees things wrong in what Adam is doing. Of course, for him to see things wrong, there had to be something bad that happened to him. His TV got smashed, but he's a little bit more of the caring character. He's the good buddy roommate who helps save the day in the end, you know? Our next character is our second. I want to say she's the main character as well. I mean, she is on the cover of the book, after all. We have Kayla, who is an absolutely insane yandere, and that is her personality. Now, I know what you're thinking. As soon as I said yandere, for those of you who are similar with the AppsSir series, that word has another meaning. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about just as a book, so simply the term, you know, you'll hear in animes where she kills to be with the one that she loves. To explain that a little more, we have to go into what the actual story is. But Kayla's entire personality is that she is crazy love-struck for Adam. And that is all she has to write home about. And, you know, she'll do whatever it takes to be with him. Our final character is Ellie, who is another side character, I would like to say. She is supposed to be, you know, the one girl at the end of the day that Adam realizes there is more to women about. She is the one character, you know, that turns things around for him in the fact that she doesn't just melt in his hands. He actually has to work for her. So there's a very cute interaction between Ellie and Adam in the book where he ends up on a date with, well, a date with her. It's very nice, but at the same time, her character is literally just there to be the I'm not going to melt in your arms character. So now we've met our characters, let's talk a little bit about the story at hand. And we'll get into one of the other weaker aspects of this book as a book, as a story. So, like I said, we start out with Adam just on a date with Kayla, doesn't even remember her name, just she is the perfect woman that he wants to get in bed with. And then, once he successfully does that, things start to change as he ghosts her. Things go on, and he tries to get with more women, because that's just what the character of Adam is. So keep in mind, at this time, he is ghosting Kayla. All of the sudden, the women start ghosting him for a change. Some of which start ghosting him before the date can even get started, i.e., the chat stops before he can even arrange the date. And that's really odd for Adam because he melts all women's hearts just by talking to him. He's worked it out to a science of how to get a woman on a date and home to his bed. That is his science. But suddenly the women start ghosting him. And because, you know, he's off his game, he's just completely confused and baffled as to why do all these women suddenly start turning him down. This is what leads us to his meeting with Ellie. Now, on the time where he has, you know, not been with any woman, he's getting down on his luck, his friend Roman has started to play a video game. And that is all Roman does from that point on. He doesn't seem to be bathing, he doesn't seem to be eating, doesn't seem to be moving from the couch and playing a game. But he does interact with Adam once to be like, hey, seriously, you pacing around the apartment, you're throwing off my game for the video game. So he tells him, go for a walk. And Adam does exactly that and ends up at the restaurant where he takes all the women that he usually dates. Air quotes around dates. And he ends up going there himself. He meets Ellie. She is a waitress at this restaurant. Now, before we enter the interaction between Adam and Ellie, I feel like it's very important to reference this. Ellie is the waitress at this restaurant where Adam brings all the women, correct? So she has seen the fact that he is consistently there day or week after week or day with another random girl. She sees that he is a chauvinistic asshole, So, when they first meet, she doesn't even give him a day's notice of interest. She's just like, would you like a table? Would you like the menu? And that's pretty much it. Any of his little tricks up his sleeve do not work. So, Ellie's something he's got a conquest now. But by the end of the night, where everyone else leaves and it's just them in the restaurant, she sits with him. And this is where the character of Ellie just loses the credibility, because she's meant to be a completely different girl. But at the same time, knowing who Adam is, she sits with him. And she talks, admittedly, she talks for hours. She doesn't go home to his bed that night. But the fact that she shows interest in Adam really throws off the character, in my eyes, that, okay, I get it. She's the one to fight for, but she knows the kind of person he is, and still she goes for it? That's just for the sake of the story at that point. So, either way, after that date, he goes back to the apartment, and the day after, of course, Ellie is not talking to him. She's not calling him. She's not responding to any chats. So he decides he's going to go to the restaurant that she works at, just to see, hey, was there something there or am I crazy? Turns out she's been missing for 3 days now. That's where things start to take their twist. And now this is where I'm going to break away from talking about the story and talk about the second biggest weakness of the book. It is extremely, and I mean right in your face, predictable as to what is happening currently and what is going to happen next. So to premise what I mean by that, we originally saw Kayla. Kayla. She had red hair. Ever since starting to ghost her, he has seen glimpses of an odd shadow, and he could swear he sees something red rush by every now and again. Of course, after his date with Kayla, all the girls that he starts trying to woo start going offline. They're not showing up on the AppsSir app, Flirtello. I now have a phone call that's ruining this. 1 second. Sorry about that. Where was I? Right. All of the women that he's trying to hook up with start going offline on the dating app that he's using. And it becomes incredibly obvious that Kayla has something to do with it. Whether she's simply kidnapping them or killing them, and, knowing what a yandere is and the fact that, the AppsSir series is very reliant on yanderes, it leans more towards Kayla killing every single woman he interacts with, because she's completely in love with him. And lo and behold, at the end of the story, that's exactly what's happening. And it is right in your face with that. There is no surprise when that happens. And that is another big weakness for this book, is if you're looking for a plot twist, a big major plot twist, you're not going to get it because it's there from the start. Let's talk a little bit more about the story now. Adam, who has known Ellie for one single day, has fallen head over heels for her and has decided, he wants to try and find out, why did she go missing? What happened? And of course, when he's at the site of her last seeing her, he gets a phone call saying, come to this place if you want to find out what happened to Ellie. Don't bring anybody. Such a big surprise. And of course, he does exactly that. Goes alone, just with a pocket knife, middle of the night, and lo and behold, they reveal there are bodies lined on the wall. All seem to be in a white dress. Some seem to be missing an arm. Not an arm. Their hand or a piece of it. Either way, it all seems to be dead women. And Kayla, and I must admit the line that she asks him is beautiful. But Kayla walks in and she's like, aren't they beautiful? And of course, Adam, seeing a bunch of dead bodies, is like, no, they're not. They're absolutely not. And Kale is like, what is the word that she uses? Let's look for the actual phrase, because it is my favorite one of the book. So after he says, no, they're absolutely not beautiful, she responds with my favorite line of the book: how superficial of you to have changed your mind. You used to think them beautiful. You used to think me beautiful. And I feel like that's just a really good line for the villain, the killer, to say, considering all the victims. And she's absolutely right. He did think them all beautiful because he always wanted to hook up with them, and now they're on a wall and oh, they're suddenly not beautiful. It's just a really good line. Either way, after that, we find out, Ellie is still alive, and now Kale is going to start killing her just to be with Adam, to show them all those girls for distractions. I can't even fully explain what she uses to torture Ellie in her own words, which will bring me to my third issue with the book. The writing describes it as follows. Kayla pulled something new out of the crate now. It was small and metal, and at first Adam could not tell what it was meant to be. When Kayla reached forward and fastened it against Ellie's wrist, Adam realized it was some kind of cuff, but he still didn't understand what it was. That's the description, followed by what it does. It lets in what you want. She paused to hit a button, and Adam saw a blue liquid move through a tube on the outside of the cuff. A moment later, Ellie started to scream and thrash about against her restraints. And then Kayla continues to use the device and says, and it lets out what you don't need, Kayla said with a grin. She pressed another button, and this time a red liquid was expelled from a tube in the cup. My main issue comes from things like that. There are many instances in this book where things are described incredibly vaguely. And it's not described vaguely to be mysterious, but simply the author's writing style. And it's just not very well described. There aren't good words, good adjectives used to describe things. And it happens a lot in the book where it'll be just like, oh, he looked at this and it was a bit disturbing. Or there'll be times where, he swung the pocket knife at her and hit her. Oh, but the blade wasn't open. It's just, things could be described so much better. It's so much clearer to make things disturbing. One of the things is when he sees all the corpses, where it's like, oh, their hand or a piece of it is missing. You could go into gruesome detail, and I get not fully wanting to, but there is a point of where if you're writing something to try and make the reader feel either disturbed or worried because, this is happening to a character, it just doesn't come off well. So, of course, everything is resolved by the end of it, and it resolves in such an unclear way. As I read, I was talking about that blue liquid that goes into the women and then drains their blood. This is probably where the book falls the flattest. And I quote, it somehow keeps them alive. The author does not know how, but the women are still alive. The author doesn't know how. And they're the one writing it. That is my biggest example of things not being described in a way that they should, because it quite literally is, the whole Star Wars thing where somehow Palpatine survived. There are good things about the story, but reading it as just someone who picks up a book, it clearly needs work. This does not feel like a finished, fully polished book. Did I like it as a book? Yeah. I expected it to be a lot shorter than it was, and I personally feel like it could have been a lot shorter than it was. Shut up, phone. But as a book, it had the solid, introduction. Suddenly there's a problem. The problem rises, and it gets resolved. All the structure is there for a proper book, and genuinely, I like, creepy stuff. So when it got into the whole, all these women are dead here, I really enjoyed that part. But none of the characters feel relatable in any way, shape, or form. It all really feels like it's just there to make the story work, rather than the characters being, part of it and involved, and you're rooting for them. It really just feels like they're put there so the story can move in the way that it needs to. So as a book in and of itself, I would probably give it 5 out of 10. I liked it. But now we're going to talk about the good things about it being an AppsSir book. Because if you don't know, when it comes to AppsSir, everything is connected. And that includes this book. So I have some theories, but first, let's start with the most obvious thing. If you don't know about the AppsSir series, Darius Guerrero, a character in it, knows that things are connected to the Tri-Nemesis. And in that way is trying to get as many people to interact with the Tri-Nemesis so they can be involved in a cybernetic afterlife of sorts. I don't know if I'm using the right words there, but because the Tri-Nemesis can make a copy of someone and put their consciousness into things like a video game. So AppsSir, the fictional company, developed the Flirtello dating app. And it's very, very clear here that Flirtello is another way for AppsSir and Darius Guerrero, the company, in the fictional world, to have people interact with the Tri-Nemesis. People who don't play video games, they're not going to be tempted to grab the video game and then contact the Tri-Nemesis that way. So there is a dating app for that audience to interact with the Tri-Nemesis. And I think it's very cool to see the fictional company, branch out in those ways, because we know why they are doing it. And then one of the things that they even mention is that there's a AppsSir application, and that Flirtello does not have a very good chat service. And I feel like that is very, very clear, because they want people to use AppsSir as well. By making it so the dating app is for the people who, want to use it for dating, and then having another chat application, you get a social audience and a dating audience both interacting with that Tri-Nemesis and getting those digital copies of people. And I feel like, they're expanding that world of AppsSir through the book, and, putting that sprinkle of stuff for people who actually are interested in the AppsSir lore. A very, very cool way of doing it is, just with simple things like that from the book. But we have more items that relate towards the AppsSir games. Now, I mentioned it earlier that Adam's roommate Roman gets completely addicted to a video game. That video game was given to him by Kayla. And she says that it was, and I quote, "They made this game a while ago. They set the game up to trigger the same mental pathways as an addiction. It's all just a matter of presentation. You should know that. You're in marketing." Who is they? Well, let's look towards the description of the game, and I think you'll figure out who they are very, very quickly. It took him a moment to find the right system, but when he did, he ripped out the game cartridge. It was old and gray and chipped in the corner with a torn paper label. Now, if you're into the AppsSir lore, it becomes quite clear what game that could quite possibly be. But let's eliminate things a little bit. If we're looking at game consoles, we have to look at older consoles because they mention cartridges. Now, if we're looking at things like that, we'd have to say, well, it has to be from anywhere before the N64 era, since that was one of the last, cartridge-based game systems. And with that information, we can zero out what game that is. If we're looking at AppsSir as the series, and obviously, if it's an addictive, simple platforming game, we're looking at an AppsSir game that had been made in the past. The easiest game that fills in that blank for us is protodere.nes. Now, if we look at the description for, how protodere was found, we see this. I couldn't find information about the game in any of the listings. It's either an obscure bootleg or pre-production cart that never made it to release. Roman didn't know what the game was, so it would make sense if it was a pre-production cart. I was able to rip the ROM so you guys can have a look at it. Despite the internal damage on the game's circuit board, they were able to do that. So there is damage to the cartridge. And, as we know, it would be for a Nintendo, the Nintendo Entertainment System. Add that with the image of protodere plus NES's cartridge, we see a little thing of tape on there that says, "Not for sale." That pretty much all but confirms that the game that Roman is playing in this story is protodere.nes. And I think that's super cool for them to incorporate in there and just hide with the tiny detail that it's a cartridge. They gave that much information, you can determine it has to be protodere.nes that he's playing. That's super, super cool. But there's more things for AppsSir in there. So we've talked about the Flirtello app and the Chatser app and why they've made the AppsSir series. We've talked about the protodere.nes cartridge showing up in this story. But there's another very important piece of information. Remember that item that she used on Ellie that gave the blue liquid and got rid of the red liquid, which was blood? Here's how she describes it. Some old company produced this to control their experiments. The Rothstein Institute, or something like that. Their program got shut down, but this still works wonderfully. It lets in what you want. The Rothstein Institute and experiments. Well, there's a little certain program that Rothstein developed called the Yandere program. And as we know, they ended that program. They captured and killed all the Yanderes. But through the development, considering they had to give them, incredible strength and endurance, it would make a lot of sense that during those experiments, they needed to develop something to keep them under control. So I originally thought that blue liquid was some sort of concoction that made yanderes, but that didn't seem to be the case. But what we know then is that Kayla has two options for who she is now. Option one is the most prevalent, and that is that she could be another yandere that got loose. As we know from the Sega Genesis game of the other yandere, I believe it was simply called. One of them did escape. Kara did end up hunting her down. I believe that was Mai or Mia, and then they got killed. But who's to say another one didn't? Who's to say Kayla didn't escape? And the reasoning that she could potentially be a yandere, actually there's a couple. But first and foremost is she had to have known about the experiments to know what those cuffs were for. She knew that they were to control the experiments. Only people who know about what Rothstein was doing would have known that there were cuffs to, control yanderes. Secondly, she's a yandere herself, in the fact that she falls head over heels for Adam and will do anything to, keep him for herself, including murder. But in reality, she didn't end up murdering those girls. Those are the two biggest things that point to her potentially being a yandere. Option 2 for what she might be completely denies that she's a yandere. Option 2 simply implies that she either worked for Rothstein or knew about Rothstein. And the reasoning for this option is it states that she can't be a yandere. And these are obviously my own theories, but option 2, and we'll explain why she can't be a yandere with this option. First and foremost, if you're a yandere, you have an assigned senpai. And not once in this story did you ever hear Kayla call Adam senpai. And that is a key phrase, and that is what drives a yandere to a person, is that they're their senpai. So because of this, Adam is very clearly not Kayla's senpai. She never once called him it, and she didn't seem to know him before this. So, additionally, yanderes show immense strength. When we watched Kara's first video, she was able to punch through people, decapitate them with the hit of a bat. We don't see Kayla show any immense strength. She lifts Ellie by a chain, but that's not really, requiring superhuman strength. Additionally, all the yanderes, I believe, had a signature weapon, i.e. Kara had her bat. Kayla here used the cuffs. But that's not a signature weapon, because that was something Rothstein had developed themselves and she took from the institution in some shape or form. She didn't have that assigned to her herself. So Kayla, again, shows no assigned weapon. Meaning, she's most likely not a yandere. She hasn't shown the aspects of a yandere other than being completely and utterly insane and infatuated with someone. That can simply be from a character themselves. Of course, obviously, to imply she's not a yandere as well, all we know for the two yanderes are Kara and whichever one was in the other yandere. Those were the only two that we know of any shape and form, and the other one already died, leaving Kara as the last yandere. So if this story happens after, Proto-Dare Ness, then she could not possibly be a yandere. But that doesn't mean she couldn't have worked with or for Rothstein Institute in some way, which I do believe. That's the one I believe. I don't believe she's a yandere. I believe she was somehow involved with the Rothstein Institute, though. So when we're talking about things that are there for people who are actually interested in the AppsSir series as a whole, there is a lot there that intrigues at least me in the way of, oh, this means this for AppsSir. This means she knows this, and this is that specific game. There's a lot of things that when I read them, I was like, that's Proto-Dare.Ness. she knows about the Rothstein Institute. This could have been used to control the Yonderis. I like that a lot. And I do feel like this book serves a much better purpose for readers if you are interested in the AppsSir series. If you are, it increases, the rating because of all that little interesting things that are in there that point towards either the future of AppsSir or, just to tell a little bit more about the story in general. When it included that, I would say my rating for the book is, I'd say a 7 out of 10. Because I can't lie, when I read those, I did go back a couple times and be like, oh, that could mean this, that could mean that. So as someone who is interested in the AppsSir series, it is a much more interesting read. But like I said, for someone who's just looking to pick up a book, I wouldn't recommend Ghosting Online because you'll get a lot more if you're interested in the series rather than just looking for something to read. This video was a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I guess I had a lot to talk about this book. So that's all I really have to say about this story as a whole. If you're just looking for something to read, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're an AppsSir fan, I would absolutely recommend reading it. Also, the book was $1, a super cheap price for sure, especially for someone who's interested in AppsSir. But as a whole, Darius Guerrero obviously has some more work to improve on when it comes to making stories. Not a bad first attempt, but I am hoping for the second story, which I do plan on reading and making a video like this, because I want to cover all the AppsSir material that I can. I'm hoping for the second book, he's taken the time, looked through his first, noticed maybe some of the grammatical errors, had some more time for editing, and also hears feedback and, takes that and improves for the next story or stories. But I am excited to see what comes next for the AppsSir series. I already know of a bunch of games that I'm super behind on playing, and another book that I'm super behind on reading that I'm excited to read and cover. But as a whole, not bad. Definitely needs some work, but I enjoyed it personally. So that is it for this strange video. I'm not sure if I'm going to put it on a Saturday or just throw it in randomly in a week, because it's not my normal type of video. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll leave the link to the Ghosting Online story if you want to go read that. And if you're just interested in the AppsSir series, I absolutely recommend exploring everything they've got. YouTube channel, the stories, the games. There is so much there, and it is such a big rabbit hole, and I'm sure the community would love to welcome you on the Discord. So thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.